My name is Kelly Johnson. I'm 32 years old now, and I've learned that some memories don't fade, they sharpen with time, like photographs left too long in the darkroom. The story I'm about to tell isn't easy. It's about family envy and the kind of betrayal that forces you to grow up long before you're ready. When people used to pass by our old house on Maple Street, they'd see perfection, a two-story colonial with powder blue shutters, a white fence, and flower boxes always brimming with petunias. My mother was proud of that house. She'd polish the front doorknob every Sunday until it gleamed like gold. Dad called it our little dream, and for years I believed him. From the sidewalk, you'd never know that inside those walls, storms were quietly gathering. I was 12 when I first realized that love in our family didn't flow evenly. My sister Stephanie, 4 years older, was everything people adored: confident, beautiful, effortlessly charming. If sunshine could walk, it would look like her. She could make a joke and turn a scolding into laughter. Teachers loved her neighbors, praised her. And my parents, well, they orbited around her like she was gravity itself. That left me the quiet one with messy hair, always lugging around a sketchbook or some half-finished craft project. I never wanted to compete with Stephanie. I only wanted to be close to her. I used to wait by the window when she'd come home from school, running out barefoot, just to tell her about my day. Sometimes she smiled and ruffled my hair. Sometimes she didn't even look up from her phone. When we were little, things had been different. I remember us sprawled on the living room carpet, building castles out of pillows and pretending to be queens ruling over invisible kingdoms. Stephanie would always assign herself the older, wiser queen, and I'd gladly follow. We'd giggle until Mom told us to quiet down, our laughter echoing through the house like music. Those were the moments that convinced me love was simple. But love isn't simple. It's fragile, and sometimes it changes shape without warning. The first real crack appeared when I was 10. Grandma Grace, Mom's mother, had given me a charm bracelet for my birthday, a delicate silver chain with a tiny bird charm. For freedom, she'd said. I wore it every day. Then one morning it was gone. I searched everywhere desperate until I found it on Stephanie's wrist. When I asked her about it, she smiled too sweetly. I was just borrowing it, Kelly. You're so possessive. But later that night, when Mom noticed me crying, Stephanie's tone shifted like the flick of a switch. She cried louder, louder than I ever could, claiming I'd accused her out of jealousy because she was more mature. My parents comforted her. Dad even scolded me for being dramatic. That night, I realized something about my sister, something I didn't have words for then. She didn't need to lie directly. She just knew how to tilt the truth until everyone leaned her way. From then on, the house on Maple Street didn't feel like home. It felt like a stage. Stephanie played the angel, I played the problem. And my parents too busy chasing success, Mom selling houses, Dad buried in accounting. Files clapped at all the right moments, never noticing the cracks in the script. Only Grandma Grace seemed to see through it. She lived 20 minutes away in a cozy bungalow filled with old books and the faint smell of lavender soap. When things got tense at home, I'd bike there. She'd pour hot chocolate drop in tiny marshmallows and listen without interrupting. She never badmouthed my parents, but she'd say things like, "Some people fear another person's light because it reminds them how dim their own has become." I didn't understand then how much truth was hidden in those words. By the time I turned 14, I started finding my own way to breathe. It began the day Grandma handed me a secondhand Canon camera she'd found at a yard sale. It wasn't fancy scratched body faded strap, but when I looked through the lens for the first time, the world transformed. Ordinary things, the shimmer of rain on the driveway, the reflection in a puddle. Even Stephanie's bored expression at breakfast suddenly looked important. That camera became my escape hatch. Through its lens, I could control what stayed in the frame and what I left out. In photographs, I could make beauty from chaos, light from shadows. Maybe that's why I fell so deeply in love with it, because I couldn't control anything else. At first, Stephanie didn't care about my hobby. She thought it was cute. But when my photos started winning small local contests, she began to notice. And when teachers displayed my work on the school hallway board, she noticed too much. One afternoon, I overheard her on the phone with a friend. Kelly thinks she's some kind of prodigy now. Please, she takes pictures of puddles. Then laughter hers, sharp and mean. Still, I tried not to let it change me. I told myself that families have friction. Siblings fight. It's normal. But deep down, I felt something colder forming between us, like the space after a door slams. Mom always said, "You two will grow out of this silly rivalry." but she never saw the way Stephanie looked at me when she thought no one was watching. That flicker of calculation, the quiet promise that if life ever became a competition, she'd win. I didn't know it yet, but I was already living inside a photograph, one carefully composed by my sister. Every lie, every manipulation, every tear she shed in front of our parents was part of the frame she was building around me. The perfect family photo on Maple Street was already developing its dark edges. If I'd known then how far she'd go to protect her spotlight, maybe I'd have taken fewer pictures and more precautions. Because the truth is, a camera only shows what's visible, and evil often hides just outside the frame. The year I turned 15, I began to notice that Stephanie's laughter never reached her eyes anymore. There was a time when she used to lean on me for everything, borrowing my sweaters, sharing secrets about boys, even letting me braid her hair while we watched TV. But that girl was fading, replaced by someone sharper, colder. The change began slowly. A snide comment here, a small joke there. At first, I brushed it off as growing pains. She was in high school after all, maybe stress, maybe hormones. But one afternoon, she stood by the kitchen counter, sipping orange juice while I showed Mom a photo I'd taken of Grandma's garden sunlight, glinting through the petals like stained glass. Mom smiled. "Kelly, this is beautiful. You have real talent." Stephanie didn't even glance at the photo. She probably just got lucky with the lighting. Her words were casual, but the tone cut deep. Mom didn't notice or pretended not to. She just said, "Well, lucky lighting or not, it's lovely," and went back to folding laundry. That was how it always was, Stephanie landing the invisible blows and me being told to stop taking things so personally. Over time, her comments turned into acts. My favorite sweater accidentally ended up in the wash with bleach. A report I'd spent weeks on went missing the night before it was due, only to be found later torn in half in the trash can behind our garage. When I confronted her, she'd blink at me with wide, innocent eyes and whisper, "You really need to stop blaming me for everything, Kelly. It's not a good look." And the worst part, she made me doubt myself. Was I overreacting? Misremembering. Maybe I had misplaced the report. Maybe I had left the sweater too close to the cleaning supplies. That's how gaslighting works. You stop trusting your own eyes, your own memory, until the world tilts completely out of focus. By the time Stephanie went off to college at 20, the tension had calcified into something solid and cold. She was the golden daughter, earning praise for everything she touched, while I hovered at the edges of family dinners, careful not to breathe too loudly. Dad's eyes always followed her with pride. "That's my girl," he'd say when her name appeared in the local paper for making the dean's list. When I brought home a regional photography award, he smiled distractedly and said, "That's great, kiddo," before turning back to the TV. It shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Love shouldn't feel like a competition, but it did. Still, there was one place where I didn't feel like I was losing Grandma Grace's kitchen. That little house smelled like cinnamon and coffee grounds, and sunlight always fell just right across her lace curtains. She had this way of seeing through me, not just what I said, but what I didn't. One afternoon, I told her about the latest fight, how Stephanie had borrowed my necklace, denied it, and then accused me of being paranoid. Grandma listened quietly, stirring her tea. When I finished, she looked at me with those soft, knowing eyes. "Some people, sweetheart, confuse attention with love. When they stop being the center, they panic. Your sister's not angry at you. She's terrified you'll outshine her." Her words landed like a secret I wasn't ready to hear. "I don't want to outshine her," I said. "I just want her to stop treating me like I don't exist." Grandma smiled sadly. "That's what makes you different, Kelly. You want harmony. She wants control. Be careful with people who think love is a limited resource. They'll drain you just to feel full." That night I went home uneasy. There was a storm in the air, one of those Pennsylvania nights where the sky feels heavy, swollen with rain. Stephanie was home from college for the weekend. We ate dinner in silence, forks clinking, TV murmuring in the background. When Mom asked about her classes, Stephanie launched into a story about how her professor had called her paper the most insightful in the class. Dad beamed. "Of course." Then Mom turned to me. "And how's school, Kelly?" I started to mention that Mrs. Lawson, my photography teacher, had submitted one of my portraits to a national student showcase. But before I could finish, Stephanie laughed lightly and said, "That's cute. Maybe they'll hang it in the hallway next to the finger paintings." Mom chuckled, just a polite, distracted laugh, but that was enough. The rest of the dinner felt like I was dining underwater. Afterward, I went up to my room, shut the door, and stared at the photos taped to my wall. Faces, landscapes, fragments of light, all the little moments I'd captured. I realized something important that night. Pictures never lie, but people do. From then on, I started noticing everything. The way Stephanie's compliments always came with a sting. The way she'd glance at me when Dad was around just to make sure he was watching her first. A few days later, I found an envelope on my pillow. Inside was a photo I'd taken when I was proud of a portrait of Grandma Grace smiling in her garden. Across the photo, in black marker, someone had written, "Perfect little Kelly, always playing victim." There was no signature. There didn't need to be one. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering what I'd done to deserve this endless rivalry. And somewhere downstairs, I heard laughter, Stephanie's voice soft and confident blending with our parents'. It hit me then no one was going to save me. Not Mom, not Dad, not anyone but me. Still, I held on to one thought, one fragile thread that kept me steady. Grandma Grace's words echoing in my mind. You have a light inside you that threatens her. Maybe that was why she hated me. Maybe that was why she needed to break me. But I wouldn't let her, not yet. Because even though she didn't know it, I had something she didn't, a way to capture truth. And one day my lens would see everything she tried to hide. By the time I turned 16, my world had shrunk to two places, school and Grandma Grace's kitchen. Home had become a museum of tension, where every sound echoed too loudly, where every word risked misinterpretation. Photography was the only space where I could breathe. It wasn't just a hobby anymore. It was a language, a way of translating pain into beauty. Through the camera, I learned to focus literally and metaphorically on what mattered. That summer, Grandma gifted me something that would change everything, a real camera. A used Canon, a little battered, but dependable. She's not new, Grandma said, placing it gently in my hands, but she's got stories left to tell, like us. The weight of it felt right solid, honest. I remember raising it for the first time, peering through the viewfinder at Grandma's face as she laughed. The wrinkles around her eyes caught the afternoon light, and in that moment I saw what she meant. Every line told a story of survival. From then on, I carried the camera everywhere. After school, I'd wander through town, snapping photos of things people usually ignored, the way raindrops clung to the underside of a mailbox, or the way shadows twisted between fence slats. I'd stay out until sunset, chasing light until it disappeared. When I entered my first small-town photo contest, I didn't expect much, but I won second place. The next year, first. My teacher, Mrs. Lawson, began taking an interest. She was one of those quiet teachers, the kind who never raised her voice, but somehow commanded every room she walked into. She told me once, "You don't just take pictures, Kelly. You listen through your lens." Her belief in me became a lifeline. She started submitting my photos to regional exhibitions, and to my disbelief, some won. Small cash prizes, certificates, but what mattered most was validation. Someone saw me. Stephanie didn't like that. When she came home from college for Thanksgiving that year, my latest winning photo was framed on the hallway wall, a close-up of a cracked window pane reflecting morning sunlight. Dad had proudly hung it there after Mrs. Lawson wrote a note saying it had been chosen for the local art magazine cover. Stephanie paused in front of it that first night back. She tilted her head, a faint smirk curling her lips. "Nice," she said softly, for something so ordinary. Mom, oblivious, chimed in, "It's extraordinary." People love finding meaning in small things. Stephanie smiled thinly. Of course they do. It's how the untalented survive. The room went quiet. Dad cleared his throat, muttering something about how tired everyone must be from the drive. But I caught Grandma Grace's eyes across the table, sharp, assessing, worried. She'd heard the venom under Stephanie's calm tone. Later that night, while everyone slept, I found the photo frame face down on the floor. The glass cracked diagonally across the middle. I knew she'd done it. She always struck when no one was watching. The next morning, she breezed into the kitchen, sipping coffee like nothing had happened. "You should be more careful with your things," she said, smiling over the rim of her mug. Mrs. Lawson told me about a new opportunity a few weeks later, the National Youth Photography Competition. Theme: Resilience. First prize, a $20,000 scholarship. I remember gripping the flyer in trembling hands. It felt like a key, a way out. With that scholarship, I could go to art school without depending on my parents' approval or money. I could finally choose the life I wanted. But even before I submitted my entry, I felt Stephanie's shadow stretching toward me. She started calling home more often, asking about my little camera projects. Her tone was light, but her words were sharp. One night she called while I was editing photos on my laptop. Mom answered laughing, then passed me the phone. "Steph wants to say hi." "Hey, baby sis," Stephanie said, her voice syrupy. "Mom told me you're entering some big contest. That's ambitious." "Yeah," I said cautiously. "You sure you're ready for that level of competition? It's not like a school fair." "I'm ready." She chuckled. I hope so. Just don't embarrass yourself. You know how Mom gets when you fail. The line clicked dead before I could reply. Afterward, I sat staring at the reflection of my own face in the laptop screen. Small, tense, uncertain. I thought of Grandma's words. You have a light that threatens her. Maybe that was true. Maybe my success felt like theft to her. Still, I worked harder. Mrs. Lawson encouraged me to center my entry on portraits of women at a local shelter. Women who had survived abuse, homelessness, heartbreak. Show their strength, she said. Resilience isn't about winning, it's about enduring. I spent weeks capturing faces that told silent stories, bruises faded into strength eyes that carried entire histories. Each photo felt sacred, fragile. I wanted to do them justice. When I looked at those images, I saw something familiar in them: pain, defiance, survival. They were all of me in pieces. One afternoon, while editing the series, Stephanie came home unexpectedly. She leaned against my doorframe, pretending casual curiosity. So these are the famous photos, huh? Yes, I said, guarding the screen instinctively. She stepped closer, scanning them with a look I couldn't decipher. Admiration. Contempt, both. Finally, she smirked. They're intense. But I guess that's your thing, making sad people look pretty. When she left, something about her tone lingered, a note of quiet calculation. Later, Grandma Grace warned me again. Lock your treasures, Kelly. Sometimes people don't just envy what you have, they fear what it means for them. I laughed softly. She wouldn't go that far, Grandma. But even as I said it, a chill crept down my spine. That night, I set my new macro lens, the one I'd saved 2 years to buy carefully, in its case. I checked the lock twice before turning out the light. Through the half-open window, moonlight spilled across my photos like ghosts watching over me. If I'd known what was coming, I would have slept with the camera under my pillow. Because jealousy wasn't Stephanie's worst trait. It was her patience. She knew how to wait until the exact moment I let my guard down, and then she'd strike. By winter, the air inside our house felt like it could shatter. Everyone was smiling, but it wasn't real. It was the kind of brittle politeness that cut when you touched it. Mom would hum while cooking, Dad buried himself in work, and Stephanie, home for her college break, floated around like the perfect daughter, always offering to help set the table or pour the wine. But the moment our parents left the room, the mask slipped. Still chasing that little camera dream, she'd whisper, You know, Mom says art isn't a stable career. I didn't answer. She didn't want a conversation, she wanted a reaction. I'd learned that silence hurt her more than any comeback. Mrs. Lawson was my refuge. She guided me through my competition entry with the kind of steady encouragement I rarely got at home. She said my project had soul. You don't just capture faces, she told me one afternoon as the sun filtered through the classroom blinds. You capture what people are too afraid to show. I took that as the highest compliment I'd ever received. Meanwhile, my parents were more preoccupied with Stephanie's newest milestone. She'd been accepted into an internship at a marketing firm. It's a big opportunity, Dad said proudly at dinner. Real-world experience. I smiled and congratulated her, but Stephanie just tilted her head, her expression soft and patronizing. I guess we're both artists in our own way, she said. You take pictures and I sell ideas. Don't underestimate her, Grandma Grace said from the end of the table, her voice calm but firm. Kelly has something rare. She sees truth. Stephanie's fork paused midair. For a second, something flickered in her eyes, quick and sharp, like the flash of a blade. After that night, I noticed a change. Small things began to go missing. My favorite scarf, my sketchbook, even a few USB drives. Nothing valuable enough to report, just enough to make me uneasy. Then came the day of the bleach incident. I found my best cardigan, one I'd bought with babysitting money, ruined the fabric, eaten through in white patches. Mom said it must have been a laundry mistake. Stephanie stood behind her, hiding a smile behind her mug of coffee. It was all so subtle, so perfectly executed that I started doubting my own mind. But Grandma Grace didn't doubt me. During one of my visits, I broke down completely. She's doing it on purpose, I said, but I can't prove it. And every time I try, I look crazy. Grandma Grace handed me a warm cup of cocoa and let me cry. When I calmed down, she said, Kelly, there's a kind of cruelty that thrives in the shadows because it knows how to look innocent in the light. Don't let her make you question your own eyes. I nodded, clutching the mug. The next day I made a promise to myself I would protect my dreams no matter what Stephanie did. I kept saving. Every paycheck from my part-time grocery store job went toward my equipment. Every tip, every dollar bill, stuffed into a jar, labeled lens. Finally, after 2 years of saving, I had enough. $700, exactly what I needed for a macro lens. The kind that could capture the smallest details, a tear trembling on a lash, a reflection in an eye, the fine wrinkles that told an entire life story. When I held that lens for the first time, it felt sacred. Even Stephanie's curiosity couldn't ruin the moment. She examined it one afternoon, pretending to be impressed. "Wow," she said, turning it over in her hands. "It's expensive looking. Be careful not to lose it." The way she said lose it made my stomach twist. That evening, I tucked the lens into its padded case and stored it at the back of my desk drawer. I checked it 3 times before sleeping. Still, the next morning, when I opened the drawer, the case was slightly tilted, moved just enough for me to notice. I stared at it, heartbeat quickening. My parents were downstairs. Stephanie was in the kitchen, humming along to the radio. I opened the case. The lens was there. For now. Over the next few weeks, my paranoia deepened. I began keeping my camera equipment in a locked cabinet. I even changed the hiding spots every few days. But Stephanie was always one step ahead, always too kind, too attentive. "Need help setting up your lights? Want me to proofread your captions?" Her offers sounded generous, but her eyes betrayed her studying every move I made, memorizing where I stored things. Then she brought home someone new. His name was Jackson. He was tall, quiet, polite, to the point of awkwardness. The first time we met, he shook my hand and said, "You must be the photographer. I've seen your work around the house." I was startled. Most people never noticed my photos, but Jackson did. I caught him studying the framed picture of Grandma Grace in the hallway longer than was polite. At dinner, while Stephanie talked animatedly about her classes and her boss who adored her, I noticed Jackson's expression tighten whenever she exaggerated her achievements. He didn't interrupt, but his silence spoke volumes. When I served dessert, he lingered a moment as Stephanie left to grab her phone. "You have an eye," he said quietly. "Those photos, they feel honest." It was such a simple sentence, but it was the first genuine compliment I'd heard in months. Stephanie returned, then smiling too wide. "What are you two whispering about?" "Your sister's photography," Jackson replied easily. Her smile faltered just a bit. "Oh, that old thing." From that night on, I sensed tension between them, small, invisible cracks. I wondered if Jackson saw through her the way I did. Part of me hoped he did. Another part feared what she might do if he confirmed what I'd always known, that her kindness was a costume. Meanwhile, my competition project was nearing completion. The theme resilience felt personal. My subjects from the women's shelter had begun trusting me, opening up about their scars, their healing. I promised them I'd do their strength justice. When I showed Grandma Grace the first proofs, her eyes welled up. "These women," she whispered, "you've given them back their dignity." That meant more to me than any prize. As I packed up that night, Grandma took my hand. "Kelly, I know you don't want to think the worst of your sister, but sometimes love blinds us to danger. Don't keep all your treasures where others can reach." I hesitated, thinking she was being overprotective. "You mean my lens?" "I mean your peace." I didn't understand then. Not really. But I would soon. Because just when everything seemed to be aligning, the project, my grades, my future, that was when Stephanie decided to destroy it all. And this time, she wouldn't just chip away at my confidence. She'd go for the one thing that made me feel alive. It was the kind of winter that made the air sting. Frost on the window panes, every breath turning white. My camera batteries died faster in the cold, but I didn't care. The competition deadline was only 3 weeks away, and I was living off adrenaline, caffeine, and the promise of escape. The project was nearly done, portraits of women who had survived things most people couldn't even imagine. Strength, sorrow, resilience. I could see all of it in their eyes. Every shot I took felt like a piece of my own story. I came home one night after a full day of shooting, my fingers stiff from the cold, my mind buzzing with ideas. I walked straight upstairs, dropped my camera bag on the floor, and flopped onto my bed. For once I felt proud, confident. I didn't know that it would be the last peaceful moment I'd have in that house. The next afternoon, I unzipped my camera bag and froze. The lens case was open, empty. At first, I thought I was mistaken. I checked my desk, my drawers under my bed, even my backpack. Nothing. I tore through my room, panic rising like a flood. My lens was gone. That lens wasn't just expensive, it was irreplaceable. 2 years of saving, every dollar earned, every skipped lunch, it had all gone into that one piece of glass. My hands trembled. My throat burned. "Mom," I called, rushing downstairs. "Did you move my camera equipment?" She looked up from her laptop, distracted. "No, honey." Why? It's missing. My lens, someone took it. Dad, sitting across the room, lowered his newspaper. Are you sure you didn't misplace it? You're always carrying that thing around. I know exactly where I put it. My voice cracked. Stephanie, curled on the couch with a mug of tea, didn't even look up. Maybe you left it at school. I turned to her. I didn't. I checked everything. She shrugged, her eyes fixed on the TV. Well, you can't blame me. I don't even touch your stuff. But there was something in her voice too calm, too rehearsed. I stared at her for a long second, my heart pounding. You wouldn't... She finally looked up. Wouldn't what, Kelly? You really need to stop accusing people every time you lose something. It's exhausting. Dad sighed. Enough, both of you. Kelly, look again. Maybe it rolled under your bed. Rolled under my bed. It wasn't a coin, it was a $700 lens. But I knew better than to argue. I went back upstairs, shut the door, and pressed my hands to my face. The silence was unbearable. Then, as if on instinct, I checked my memory cards. I kept a backup my entire project stored safely in a small metal tin inside my desk drawer. When I opened it, my stomach dropped. Empty. Gone. It was like someone had reached into my future and stolen it. For a few seconds, I couldn't even move. I just stood there, the tin dangling loosely in my hand. Then I sat on the floor, shaking. When my parents came home that evening, I told them everything. The missing lens, the vanished memory card, how it all happened, right before the deadline. Dad frowned. You really need to be more organized, Kelly. I didn't lose them, I said, voice rising. Someone took them. Mom sighed. Sweetheart. Who would steal a camera lens? We don't even lock our doors half the time. From the living room, Stephanie's voice floated in. Maybe check your locker at school. Didn't you bring your camera there last week? That was the thing about her. She never denied outright. She just planted doubt one seed at a time until everyone believed the garden was mine. That night I lay in bed, eyes wide open, the ceiling fan spinning shadows across my walls. Every click of its blade sounded like a countdown. The submission deadline was in 3 days. By morning I was desperate enough to call Leah, my best friend since middle school, my one constant. She listened in stunned silence as I explained everything. Then she said, without hesitation, I've got you. My cousin's a photographer. He'll lend you his macro lens. I nearly cried. Within hours, Leah and her cousin drove down from the next town. I met them at the diner parking lot, and he handed me a well-used but professional lens. Be careful, he said kindly. She's temperamental, but loyal, kind of like an old friend. That night I didn't sleep. I shot and edited, nonstop retaking every lost photo, chasing the same angles, the same emotion. I could barely feel my fingers by the time the clock struck midnight, but I didn't stop. When I finally hit submit on the competition portal at 2:57 a.m., 3 hours before the deadline, a sob escaped my throat. Relief, exhaustion, disbelief, all tangled together. I'd done it, against every obstacle I'd survived. When I came home after school the next day, the living room was unusually quiet. Stephanie sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, her face unreadable. Everything okay? I asked cautiously. She didn't look up, just peachy. Something in her tone made the hairs on my neck stand up, but I was too tired to engage. I trudged upstairs, collapsed on my bed, and let sleep drag me under. When I woke up, the sun was already setting. The house was dim, silent, too silent. I thought everyone had gone out until I heard muffled voices downstairs. Stephanie's sobs, Mom's soothing tone, Dad's low growl of anger. I walked into the living room, still groggy camera bag slung over my shoulder. Stephanie sat hunched on the couch, shoulders shaking. Mom's arm was around her. Dad stood over them, veins visible on his neck. The air felt thick. Where have you been? Mom's snapped eyes red. We've been trying to reach you all afternoon. I was asleep, I said slowly. Why? What's wrong? Stephanie lifted her head. Her eyes were wet, but her expression somehow wasn't sorrow. It was satisfaction. How could you? She whispered. You were supposed to be my sister. I froze. What are you talking about? Dad stepped forward, voice taut. Stephanie's savings, $2,000 she'd been keeping for a trip with friends, are gone. I blinked. What? She says she kept it in an envelope in her desk drawer, Mom said. It's missing. Completely. I looked from one face to another, disbelief sinking in. I don't even know what you're talking about. I didn't. She found these in your camera bag. Dad held up several envelopes labeled with Stephanie's handwriting, $200, $400, $600. My vision blurred. I couldn't breathe. She planted them, I whispered. She must have put them there when I wasn't home. Stephanie's sobs grew louder. I didn't want to believe it, but after the lens went missing, it makes sense now. You must have sold it? That's not true, I cried. Dad's face hardened. Enough. We'll search your room. If there's nothing to hide, you won't mind. I wanted to scream that this was insane, that this was exactly what she wanted, but my voice came out thin, trembling. Go ahead. They went upstairs. I stood frozen. Stephanie lowered her hands from her face, meeting my eyes. And in that split second, she smiled. A slow, quiet, triumphant smile. She had framed me perfectly, completely. And I was trapped in the picture she'd composed. They searched my room like detectives in a crime show, but this wasn't TV. It was my life being dismantled one drawer at a time. My heart pounded so loud it drowned out their voices upstairs. Each sound of a door slamming, each gasp or muttered accusation carved into me like glass. When Dad finally called my name, it wasn't the sound of a parent, it was a verdict. Kelly, he said, his voice low and dangerous, come up here. I climbed the stairs on legs that barely felt like mine. The hallway light flickered, throwing long shadows across the floor. In my doorway stood Mom, pale and trembling. In her hand, my missing macro lens. It looked foreign there in her grasp, as if it had already betrayed me. This was in your closet, Mom whispered, inside your boot. That's impossible, I said, breathless. It wasn't there. I tore this room apart looking for it. Someone. Stop, Dad cut in sharply. No more stories. It's not a story. My voice broke. She planted it. She took it and hid it there. Please just listen to me. But they weren't listening. They never did. Dad crossed his arms. Disappointment etched deep into his face. You lied to us, Kelly. You stole from your sister, and now you're making up ridiculous excuses. Do you think we're fools? I didn't steal anything. Mom turned away, tears spilling down her cheeks. Why would you do this? You've never been this kind of child. What happened to you? The question was meant to sting, and it did. Then, as if the universe wanted to mock me, Dad held up another piece of evidence, a printed bank statement with my name on it, a recent $2,000 deposit. My jaw fell open. That's fake. I don't even have that account. He slammed it onto my desk. We found it in your drawer. Are you saying it appeared by magic too? Something inside me snapped. Yes, because none of this is real. She's framing me, because she can't stand that I'm finally doing something for myself. The air thickened. Mom whispered, don't drag your sister into this again. And that's when I realized no amount of truth could compete with their image of her. Stephanie had always been their masterpiece, the golden portrait they'd spent years polishing. I was just the shadow in the background. From the hallway, I heard a faint creak. Stephanie standing just out of sight, pretending to eavesdrop in concern. Bring her in here, I shouted, but Dad's hand came down on the desk with a crack. Enough. Do you hear yourself? You sound hysterical. I laughed then. A broken, trembling laugh. Because you refuse to see what's right in front of you. Dad's expression hardened further. You're grounded. No school, no photography, no leaving this house until you take responsibility. You can't ground someone for something they didn't do. Then maybe, he said coldly, you shouldn't have done it. I stared at him, every cell in my body screaming for him to look at me, really look at me. But he couldn't. His love for me had been buried under years of Stephanie's tears, her fake innocence, her careful manipulation. Dad, I whispered, please, let me call Grandma Grace. She'll tell you. He snatched the phone from my hand. You're not dragging your grandmother into this. That was it. That was the moment the ground split open beneath me. Mom's voice shook. Maybe we should call the police. Dad's head snapped toward her. No, we'll handle this in-house. He turned to me. But you're leaving this room right now. I can't even look at you. I followed him down the stairs in a haze. My pulse roared in my ears. Stephanie sat on the couch, eyes red face, buried in her hands. The performance was perfect. When she glanced up, she gasped on cue. Did you find anything? Mom sobbed softly. Yes, we did. Stephanie shook her head as if heartbroken. Kelly. Why I would have helped you if you needed money. Something inside me went cold. Don't, I said quietly. What? Don't pretend you care. Her eyes widened, shimmering with false tears. I do care. You set me up. Kelly, Mom snapped. Enough. The room swayed. Everything felt unreal, the glow of the fireplace, the steady hum of the heater, the snow still falling outside like confetti for my destruction. Dad's voice cut through it all, low and final. Pack your things. What? You heard me. Dad, it's February. I have nowhere to... You made your choice, he said. You steal from this family, you lie to us, and you expect to stay under our roof. Not happening. I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. None came. Mom whispered. Frank, she's 16. He turned to her. And she's old enough to know right from wrong. I wanted to scream, to throw something to wake up from this nightmare. Instead, I whispered, you'll regret this. Stephanie flinched ever so slightly, as if the truth had brushed too close. Dad's jaw tightened. 15 minutes. Take only what you need. I went upstairs numb. My hands moved automatically, backpack closed, toothbrush. The house was quiet, except for the ticking of the hall clock. My life reduced to a handful of items. Before leaving, I paused at my dresser and picked up the framed photo of Grandma Grace. Her eyes, kind, fierce wise, seemed to follow me. When I came back down, Dad was waiting by the door. He handed me a $20 bill. That's all you're getting. You should be grateful I'm not calling the cops. Grateful. My voice cracked. You're throwing me out into the snow barefoot because your favorite daughter cried, pretty enough. Watch your tone. Why, it's not like you're listening. For the first time, I saw a flicker of guilt in his expression, but it was gone as quickly as it appeared. Out, he said quietly. I glanced at Mom. She looked away. Can I at least have my shoes? He hesitated, then opened the door. No. Maybe a walk in the cold will help you think. The icy air hit me like a slap. I stepped outside in my socks, the snow biting at my skin. Behind me, the door clicked shut, locked. Through the window, I saw Stephanie standing by the curtain. She met my eyes. And then slowly, deliberately, she smiled and drew the fabric closed. That was the moment I realized the depth of her cruelty. It wasn't enough for her to win. She needed to erase me. The cold bit deeper as I started walking. My feet left prints that the wind would soon cover, as if I'd never existed. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. A porch light flicked on. The world kept moving, indifferent. Behind me, our perfect house stood still, glowing warm and golden against the snow, a frame so flawless it hid everything rotten inside. And I was the ghost left outside of it. The first step burned. The second went numb. By the third, I couldn't tell where my body ended, and the winter began. The cold carved through me clean and merciless. I kept walking. The night was painfully quiet, broken only by the soft crunch of snow under my feet and the rhythmic rasp of my own breathing. Streetlights blurred in my vision. My fingers were stiff, my jaw clenched so tightly it ached. I told myself I couldn't stop, not here, not where the neighbors could see me, not where Stephanie could peek through the curtain and laugh. I didn't even know where I was going until my body decided for me, Leah's house. It wasn't far, a mile and a half maybe. But that distance stretched like a lifetime in the freezing dark. Every gust of wind cut through my sweater like glass. My feet throbbed, then went silent like they'd given up sending signals. I passed the Andersons' front porch, warm light spilling from their windows, laughter drifting out. My life used to sound like that once. Now it felt like I was walking outside of time, a ghost haunting the town that forgot me. Somewhere behind me, a car slowed. The headlights crawled over me, pausing just long enough for me to feel the shame burn hotter than the cold. I pulled my hood tighter and kept walking. The car rolled past. When I finally reached Leah's street, the world had shrunk to a narrow tunnel of dim light and pain. My vision pulsed with every heartbeat. I almost didn't make it up her driveway. My knees buckled halfway, and I grabbed the railing to stay upright. The porch light flicked on before I even rang the bell. The door swung open. Kelly. Mrs. Anderson's voice cracked into disbelief. Oh my God, what happened to you? Her hands were on me, instantly warm and firm. She pulled me inside, wrapping me in the soft throw from the couch. The heat of their house hit me like fire. My body shook uncontrollably, the shock setting in, now that I wasn't moving. Leah, she shouted. Get your father now. Leah came running from upstairs, eyes wide. Kelly. Oh my God. I tried to speak, but my teeth chattered too hard for words. Mr. Anderson appeared calm but alarmed, the way only ex-military people can be. He didn't waste time asking questions. He lifted me easily and carried me to the bathroom, filling the tub with lukewarm water. Not hot, never hot, he explained softly, or the tissue could die. When he eased my feet into the water, the pain came roaring back. It was like fire under my skin. I bit my lips so hard it bled. It's okay, Leah whispered beside me, gripping my hand. You're safe now. The tears came before I could stop them, sobs that shook my whole body, half from pain, half from everything I'd been holding in for years. Mrs. Anderson crouched beside me. Where are your parents? I couldn't look at her. Home, I whispered. They kicked me out. Her face went still. In this weather, they think I stole from my sister. My voice cracked. I didn't. I swear I didn't. Leah's eyes filled with tears. I know, she said fiercely. I know you didn't. Mr. Anderson wrapped my feet with warm towels once the color began to return. His expression was calm, but his jaw was tight. Those are early frostbite burns, he said quietly to his wife. We'll need to watch them. Mrs. Anderson nodded, then looked at me. Honey, What your parents did, it's not just wrong, it's dangerous. Please, I said quickly, don't call anyone. Please don't make it worse. She hesitated, exchanging a glance with her husband. We won't do anything you don't want us to, she said finally. But you're not going back there tonight. You'll stay here. Leah nodded. You can have my room. I'll take the couch. The rest of the night passed in fragments. Mrs. Anderson made me hot soup I could barely swallow. Mr. Anderson brought down extra blankets. Leah never left my side. When I finally slept, I dreamed of snow swallowing me whole, silent, endless white. The next morning, my feet were swollen and bandaged. I sat at the Andersons' kitchen table, staring at the steam curling off my tea. Mrs. Anderson sat across from me. We can call your grandmother, she said gently. I nodded. She doesn't know yet. Please don't tell my parents. She smiled sadly. We won't. That day, while Leah was at school, I tried calling home. Once, twice, 10 times. No answer. I texted Mom, please, can we talk? The message delivered but never turned blue. By evening, my number had been blocked. That's when it truly sank in I wasn't part of that family anymore. The Andersons insisted I stay as long as I needed. They made up the guest room, helped me contact the school to explain I'd been sick. I was grateful, but I also felt like a ghost wearing someone else's kindness. Every night I'd sit by the window watching the snow fall, wondering if anyone in that house on Maple Street even looked for me. I imagined Mom walking past my empty room without pausing. Dad sitting down to dinner like nothing had changed. Stephanie filling the silence with another story, another lie. 3 days later, Mrs. Anderson came into the living room holding her phone. Honey, she said you should see this. It was a post on social media, Stephanie's profile. The caption read, "Some people only show their true colors when they think no one's watching. Praying for healing and honesty in our family." Attached was a photo of her and my parents smiling in the living room. The comments were flooded with sympathy. Stay strong, girl. Family drama's the worst. You deserve better. I stared at the screen until the words blurred. She had turned me into a villain online too. The thief. The jealous little sister. For the first time, I didn't cry. I just sat there hollow, realizing how thoroughly she'd won. But even victories rot if they're built on lies. And though I didn't know it yet, the first crack in Stephanie's perfect story was already forming one that would bring everything down. Because truth, like frostbite, doesn't show its full damage right away. It spreads quietly, until the numbness fades and all that's left is pain. By March, the snow had melted, but I still felt frozen inside. The Andersons had become my safe place, kind patient, pretending not to notice how I jumped every time the phone rang. Leah's mom told the school I'd be staying with them temporarily. My teachers gave me extensions, sympathy, gentle looks I couldn't stand. I functioned like a machine. Wake up, go to school, come home, avoid mirrors. Then one afternoon, Mrs. Lawson called me into her classroom. She was holding a letter. Kelly, she said softly, you made it to the national finals. For a moment, I didn't understand. The competition, she nodded. Your resilience series was shortlisted. They want you to attend the ceremony next month in Philadelphia. I blinked at her, stunned. I'd almost forgotten I'd even submitted the project. The memory of that night, the exhaustion, the panic, the desperation felt like a fever dream now. Mrs. Lawson smiled. This is an incredible achievement, Kelly. You should be proud. Proud. The word felt foreign in my mouth. That night, Leah's family insisted we celebrate. They ordered pizza, turned on the radio, and clapped when I smiled for the first time in weeks. Leah raised her glass of soda. To Kelly, the most resilient person I know. Everyone cheered. But later, when I was alone in the guest room, I cried quietly into the pillow. Not from joy, from grief. Because the one person I wanted to tell, the one who had given me that first camera, didn't even know what had happened. Grandma Grace. The next morning, I gathered the courage to call her. She picked up on the second ring. Kelly. Her voice cracked. Sweetheart, I've been so worried. Your parents said you needed space, but something didn't sound right. The dam broke. I told her everything. The lens, the fake envelopes, the bank statement, the night they threw me out barefoot into the snow. Grandma was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice shook, but not with shock, with fury. They did what? Please don't yell at them, I whispered. It'll just make things worse. Oh, I'm past yelling, darling, she said. I'm planning. Her voice had that calm, dangerous edge it got when she meant business. Listen to me carefully, Kelly, she continued. You'll go to that ceremony. You'll stand tall, and after that, you're coming home to me. Understood. I nodded, though she couldn't see. The next few weeks passed in a haze of preparation. Mrs. Lawson helped me polish my short speech for the ceremony. Leah insisted on taking me shopping for a dress, though I argued it was too expensive. "Shut up and let me do this," she said, grinning. "You deserve to look like the artist you are." The night before the ceremony, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Snow White, endless, unforgiving. But this time, I wasn't walking barefoot through it. I was standing in it, camera in hand, unbroken. The gallery in Philadelphia was a cathedral of light glass ceilings, marble floors, and walls lined with framed dreams. I clutched Leah's arm as we walked in, overwhelmed by the buzz of conversation, the smell of perfume and champagne. Mrs. Lawson met us near the entrance. "You ready?" she asked with a proud smile. I wasn't, but I nodded anyway. The finalists' photographs were displayed around the room, and there, near the center, was my series, Resilience. I froze. They looked even more powerful, printed large, the faces of those women staring back fierce and unashamed. Their strength radiated from the frames. Someone behind me murmured, "Who took these?" That girl another whispered, "Kelly Johnson." For the first time in months, hearing my name didn't hurt. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I turned, and there she was, Grandma Grace. Her silver hair was neatly pinned, her eyes bright and wet all at once. "I wouldn't miss this for the world," she said. I fell into her arms. She smelled like lavender and home. When I finally pulled back, she cupped my face. "You did this. On your own." "Not really," I said, glancing toward Leah and Mrs. Lawson. "I had help." Grandma smiled. "That's what family's supposed to do." The ceremony began. Lights dimmed. Applause echoed. I sat in the second row, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my fingertips. They announced the winner's first place went to a boy from Seattle with a series on homelessness. Then came the honorable mentions. My name was the last one called. Kelly Johnson for her haunting and hopeful collection, Resilience. The audience clapped. I walked to the stagehands, trembling, and accepted the plaque. The host asked me to say a few words. I stepped to the microphone, throat tight. I called my project Resilience because... My voice cracked, but I kept going. Because sometimes surviving isn't about fighting back, it's about refusing to disappear. A hush fell over the crowd. "I dedicate this to the women who trusted me with their stories," I continued, "and to anyone who's ever been made to feel small in their own home. You are more than what others believe about you." Applause erupted. Flashbulbs flickered, but all I saw was Grandma Grace standing, clapping, tears streaming down her face. After the ceremony, people congratulated me, shook my hand, asked about my next project. But Grandma pulled me aside. "Pack your things," she said firmly. "You're coming home with me tonight." "Grandma, No arguments." Her tone softened. "You've lived enough exile for a lifetime." I didn't resist. On the drive home, city lights blurred past. Grandma kept one hand on the wheel, the other reaching across to squeeze mine. She didn't ask for details. She didn't need them. But her jaw was set like stone. "Your parents told me you needed tough love," she said finally. I knew it was nonsense. But now I know it's more than that. "Something's rotten, Kelly. I can smell it." I didn't answer. My throat closed around the words. She glanced at me. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Truth has a way of finding daylight. And when it does..." Her grip tightened slightly. "We'll be ready." Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft and soundless, blanketing the roads. But this time, it didn't look cruel. It looked cleansing. Grandma Grace's house felt like a refuge from another world. No slammed doors, no forced smiles, just the quiet hum of her old heater and the smell of cinnamon that clung to everything she owned. For the first time in months, I could sleep without flinching at every sound. We built a rhythm together. I went back to school. Grandma packed lunches and told me stories about her youth. On weekends, we'd cook, tend her little garden, or watch old movies until one of us dozed off. She never pushed me to talk about what had happened, but I could feel her waiting like a patient gardener who knew some seeds took time to sprout. Then, one Sunday afternoon, while I was working on a history paper in my room, I heard the doorbell ring. Voices followed familiar ones. Mom's, Dad's, and Stephanie's. My stomach dropped. I froze in my chair, barely breathing. What were they doing here? I crept to my doorway, peering down the hall. I heard Grandma's calm tone, polite but distant. "You're early," she said. "I wasn't expecting visitors." Mom's voice trembled. "We thought it was time to talk things through, to mend the family." Family. The word hit like ice water. I stayed hidden, listening as they all settled in the living room. Grandma poured coffee. The air downstairs was thick with the kind of forced civility that always came before a storm. After 20 minutes, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Stephanie. I panicked, slipping back into my room and closing the door halfway. The floorboards creaked outside. Then, instead of turning toward the bathroom, the steps continued past my door toward Grandma's bedroom. Why was she going in there? Curiosity and a strange instinct pulled me into the hallway. I moved silently, stopping just before Grandma's door. It was slightly ajar. Inside, Stephanie was pacing her phone pressed to her ear. I recognized that tone, the one she used when she thought no one was watching. Yeah, they totally bought it, she was saying, her voice sharp with amusement. You should have seen her face when they found the lens in her closet. Priceless. My blood turned to ice. She laughed again, low and satisfied. And that fake bank statement you helped me make, it looks so real. Honestly, I didn't think Dad would throw her out like that, but hey, it worked. I clapped a hand over my mouth. I wanted to burst into the room, scream, tell her to stop, but my instincts screamed louder, record this. I pulled my phone from my pocket, trembling, and hit record. Inside, Stephanie kept talking, oblivious. No, they still have no idea. They think perfect little me is the victim. The money. Please. There was never any trip. That $2,000 is paying for our real vacation this summer. Silence, then a giggle. God, you should have seen her out there in the snow. I didn't expect Dad to go that far, but it worked out perfectly. She's completely out of the picture. By the time she crawls back, I'll have graduated, and no one will remember her side of the story. Every word was a knife and a gift. Then she added something that made my stomach twist. Honestly, it's kind of sad. She's so easy to manipulate. Cry a little, and Mom melts. Throw in a few fake receipts, and Dad loses his mind. People believe what they want to believe. And then, as if the universe had timed it, I heard another creak behind me. Grandma. She stood in the hallway, silent, her eyes narrowing as she realized what she was hearing. She didn't speak. She just stepped past me, pushed the door open fully, and said, Stephanie. The phone slipped from my sister's hand. Grandma, she gasped. I was just looking for the bathroom upstairs. Grandma's voice was steel wrapped in silk, or reliving the night you destroyed your sister's life. Stephanie stammered, eyes darting between us. You don't understand. I understand perfectly, Grandma said. I heard everything. For a long, terrible second, the air was thick with silence. Then Grandma's tone shifted, cold and deliberate. We're going downstairs. You're going to tell your parents what you just said. Every single word. They'll never believe you, Stephanie said, trying to muster her usual arrogance. But her voice trembled. Grandma smiled faintly. Oh, I think they will. She held up her own phone, showing a red circle on the screen recording. I may not be good with technology, but even I know how to hit record. For once, Stephanie looked genuinely terrified. Grandma gestured toward the stairs. Move. Stephanie obeyed. I followed my hand, still shaking my phone clutched tight insurance in case she tried to deny it. Downstairs, Mom and Dad looked up from their coffee cups, startled. What's going on, Mom asked. Grandma guided Stephanie into the middle of the room like a prisoner being led to trial. Your daughter, she said evenly, has something to confess. Grandma, please, Stephanie started. Go on, Grandma said sharply, or I'll play the recording. Dad frowned. What recording? The one where Stephanie brags about faking evidence, stealing the lens, and framing Kelly. The silence that followed was the longest of my life. Mom's cup slipped from her hand, shattering against the floor. Dad's face went white. Stephanie, he whispered, tell me she's lying. Stephanie's lips parted, then closed again. Tears welled in her eyes, but this time they didn't look convincing. They looked cornered. I didn't mean for it to go that far, she said finally, her voice breaking. I just wanted her to stop getting all the attention. Mom covered her mouth, sobbing, oh my God. Dad's jaw clenched, trembling with rage. You made us throw your sister out. You. He stopped, unable to finish. Stephanie's voice cracked into panic. I didn't think you'd actually do it. I thought you'd just yell at her. I was going to tell you eventually, I swear. Stop talking, Grandma said coldly. Every word digs your grave deeper. I stood in the corner, numb, watching, listening. Dad turned to me. Kelly. His voice broke. I don't even know what to say. There's nothing to say, I whispered. You already said it that night. His face crumpled. I'm sorry. God, I'm so sorry. Mom reached for me, but I stepped back. Grandma's voice was calm but final. Kelly stays with me until she's ready to forgive you, if she ever is. She turned to Stephanie. And you, young lady, you will face consequences. Therapy, work, whatever it takes to fix the rot you've let grow inside you. Stephanie didn't respond. She just sank into the couch, hands shaking, mascara streaking down her cheeks. For the first time, she looked small. It should have felt like victory, but instead it felt like grief, the kind you feel when you realize the person you loved never really existed. As the house fell silent, Grandma Grace looked at me, her eyes soft now. "You see, Kelly," she said quietly, "truth always finds its way home, even if it has to walk barefoot through the snow to get there." The air in the living room hung heavy, thicker than smoke, heavier than silence. My parents sat on the couch staring at Stephanie like they'd just seen a stranger wearing their daughter's face. Grandma Grace stood between us, her presence steady, unshakable, and me, I just stood there clutching my phone, unsure if I was breathing or holding my breath. Stephanie's sobs came in short bursts, half real, half performance. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she repeated over and over, like that could erase the frostbite scars on my feet, or the nights I cried into borrowed pillows. Dad rubbed his temples. "You made us think our own child was a thief." Stephanie flinched. "I was jealous, okay? You never looked at me the way you looked at her. She wins contests, gets scholarships." "Enough." Mom's voice cracked raw and hollow. "You destroyed your sister's life because you were jealous." Stephanie looked down. "I just wanted to be noticed." Grandma's eyes flashed. "You were noticed plenty. You just didn't like the mirror that came with it." Silence again. Even the house seemed to stop breathing. Then Dad turned to me. "Kelly," he said quietly, "we owe you an apology, one we can never repay." I met his eyes. The man who'd once carried me on his shoulders now looked small, ashamed. "You kicked me out in February," I whispered. "Barefoot, for something I didn't do." "I know," his voice broke. "I know, and I'll regret it every day for the rest of my life." Mom tried to reach for me, but I stepped back. "You believed her without even asking me. You looked at me and saw a criminal." Mom's tears spilled freely now. I was blinded by what I wanted to believe, that my children couldn't hate each other. Grandma crossed her arms. "You were blinded by convenience. Believing Stephanie was easier than questioning yourself." The words hit like thunder. Mom bowed her head. Dad swallowed hard. "Come home, Kelly, please. Let us make this right." I shook my head slowly. Home. The word felt sharp in my mouth. That house hasn't been home for a long time. Grandma laid a gentle hand on my shoulder. "She's staying with me," she said firmly. "At least until she decides otherwise." Dad nodded, defeated. Stephanie stared at the floor mascara, smeared, the perfect sister reduced to a trembling mess. For a moment, I almost pitied her. Almost. Then I remembered the way she'd smiled through the curtain that night, the satisfaction in her eyes as I stood barefoot in the snow, and the pity evaporated. "You know," I said softly, "you could have ruined my life completely. You almost did. Why?" She looked up, eyes red. "Because I could." The honesty of it stunned everyone, even her. Grandma exhaled slowly. "Then you can start fixing what you broke. You'll pay back every cent for Kelly's camera and equipment. You'll see a therapist. And you'll spend the rest of your life learning that love isn't a competition." Dad nodded, agreed. Stephanie didn't argue this time. When my parents left that evening, they looked older, smaller. Stephanie lingered last, glancing at me from the doorway. "I'm sorry," she whispered. I didn't answer. Some words were too small for the damage they followed. After they were gone, Grandma poured 2 cups of tea and handed one to me. "You okay?" I shook my head. "No, but maybe someday." She smiled faintly. "That's all right. Healing's not about rushing. It's about choosing not to stay broken." Weeks passed. My parents began sending my belongings one box at a time. Books, clothes, my old camera. Each delivery felt like a small truce wrapped in cardboard and tape. Stephanie called once. I didn't pick up. By spring, life began to move again. I went back to school, joined the yearbook club, and started taking pictures for the local paper. People still whispered sometimes, but less and less. The scandal was fading into something that lived only in memory. One afternoon, Mrs. Lawson pulled me aside after class. "You're stronger than you know," she said, handing me a flyer. "There's a youth photography grant themed Truth and Light. I think you should enter." Truth and Light. The words felt like a dare. That night, I stayed up editing new photographs, honest ones. Not portraits of strangers, but quiet, raw images of Grandma's hands folding laundry, the steam rising from her tea, the morning light spilling across my frostbitten scars. When I submitted the collection, I titled it Barefoot in the Snow. Months later, I won. Not the grand prize, but enough to fund my first camera upgrade. When I showed Grandma the award, she smiled through tears. Full circle, she whispered, "You took pain and made it into art." Years passed like photographs developing in slow motion. I went to college on a scholarship, then grad school, opened my own studio. My parents eventually found their way back into my life, careful, remorseful, trying. We shared holidays, small talk, polite laughter. Stephanie graduated too. She married, moved states away, had children. We speak on birthdays now words like weather forecasts, neutral, predictable, safe. Some wounds don't bleed anymore, but they don't close either. And Grandma Grace, my anchor, lived long enough to see my first gallery opening. When she passed, she left me her camera, the old used Canon that had started everything. I still keep it on my desk, scratched and dented, a reminder of where truth began. 16 years later, I stood on a stage at my own exhibition. Rows of photographs lined the walls, faces of people who'd survived betrayal, abandonment, grief. A journalist asked me, "Why do you focus on stories of pain and recovery?" I smiled, because I learned that resilience isn't about pretending the snow never fell. It's about remembering that you walked through it and survived. The audience applauded. Somewhere inside me, I could almost hear Grandma whisper, "That's my girl." I looked up at the brightest spotlight in the room, the warmth of it cutting through the memory of that freezing night long ago. And for the first time, I truly believed it. I had walked barefoot through hell, and somehow I'd come out shining.